Evening, it's me. Terry Sims, Tony Gibbs, and Ellen Blau in Wichita Falls, Texas. Investigators have finally gathered physical evidence they hoped to prove Farian Woodruff was the killer. Now it was up to Gene Screen Lab in Dallas. Judy Floyd carefully swabbed the lip of the cup to collect Woodruff's saliva. And cracker crumbs be enough to prove. Investigator approached Woodruff and asked if he could get a tobacco spit cup. Woodruff told him to help himself. With that, any evidence obtained by investigators would be admissible in a court of law. He retrieved Woodruff's cup. His wife, eating crackers and drinking coffee from a disposable cup. He was with his wife, eating crackers and drinking coffee from a disposable cup. And that posed problems for investigators. For 3 days, they watched Woodruff at work, behind a locked chain-link fence. He seemed to be beyond their reach. But on the 4th day, they got a break. On February 5th, 1999, the fence was unlocked and Woodruff was outside. He was with his wife, eating crackers and drinking coffee from a disposable cup. When he tossed the cup into a trash can just inside the gate, it was the opportunity they had been waiting for. The undercover investigator approached Woodruff and asked if he could get a tobacco spit cup. Woodruff told him to help himself. With that, any evidence obtained by investigators would be admissible in a court of law. He retrieved Woodruff's cup. Investigators hoped they now had their DNA sample. But would a few drops of coffee and cracker crumbs be enough to prove murder? More than a dozen years had passed since the murders of Terry Sims, Tony Gibbs, and Ellen Blau in Wichita Falls, Texas. Investigators had finally gathered physical evidence they hoped to prove Farian Woodruff was the killer. Now it was up to Gene Screen Lab in Dallas. Judy Floyd carefully swabbed the lip of the cup to collect Woodruff's saliva. When she compared that to DNA samples retrieved from the Sims and Gibbs murders, she was able to establish a match. And there was more. She discovered that Woodruff's profile was unique. He had not one, but 4 very rare markers in his genetic profile.
His profile was so rare that you would expect it to occur only one time in several thousand times the population of the Earth. And in effect, we were able to say that we had established identity with this particular individual to the evidence involved in Miss Sims and Miss Gibbs' case.
Investigators didn't stop there. At the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab, Glenn Unash compared Woodruff's fingerprints to the partial print found on Terry Sims' sneaker. They matched. Besides making a positive identification, Unash could explain much more.
I can also determine how that shoe was held or when that print was left on that shoe. And it was in a direction that the defendant held the shoe or was taking the shoe off the victim's foot, somewhat similar to this, which would be consistent with pulling it off of a victim's foot.
Investigators' patience and ingenuity had paid off. It was time to take Woodruff into custody. They again enlisted the cooperation of his parole officer. On the pretense of a meeting, Wardrip was summoned to the parole office on February 13, 1999. When he arrived, police arrested Ferry and Wardrip and charged him with the murder of Terry Sims. Based on the evidence, police believe Wardrip saw Terry Sims at the door of Lisa Boone's apartment. After forcing his way inside, he tied her hands behind her back, then raped and killed. Based on the evidence, police believe Wardrip saw Terry Sims at the door of Lisa Boone's apartment. Based on the evidence, police believe Wardrip saw Terry Sims at the door of Lisa Boone's apartment. Based on the evidence, police believe Wardrip saw Terry Sims at the door of Lisa Boone's apartment. Based on the evidence, police believe Wardrip saw Terry Sims at the door of Lisa Boone's apartment. Wardrip and charged him with the murder of Terry Sims. Based on the evidence, police believe Wardrip saw Terry Sims at the door of Lisa Boone's apartment. After forcing his way inside, he tied her hands behind her back, then raped and killed her. Ferry and Wardrip pled guilty to the capital murders of Terry Sims, Tony Gibbs, and Ellen Blau. He was sentenced to death in the Sims case and received life terms in each of the others. Wardrip also confessed to an additional murder. In all, he had ended the lives of 5 young women. In Texas, a serial killer's guilt was contained in a disposable coffee cup. But on the West Coast, police would have to dig deeper for proof of murder. On November 7, 1988, in Sacramento, California, social worker Judy Moyes contacted Sacramento police about one of her clients, 52-year-old Bert Montoya. She said Bert had disappeared from the boarding house where she placed him. His landlady seemed unsure about his whereabouts. Ms. Moyes told police that Dorothea Puente's boarding house was a refuge for indigent people, many with histories of alcohol and drug abuse. It seemed ideal for Bert, a street person with no place to go. He had his own room and TV and was happy there after years of living on the streets. But after a few months, Bert started saying he wanted to leave. Judy Moyes hadn't heard from Bert in 3 months. Mrs. Puente finally explained that Bert had gone to live with his brother in Utah. That made no sense to Judy Moyes. She knew Bert Montoya didn't have any family. She asked police to look into it. Officers went to interview Dorothea Puente. She seemed a gracious, grandmotherly woman, charming and eager to cooperate. She said Bert had gone to live with family in Utah. One of the residents in the boarding house corroborated the account.
I know who he is.
But as the officer was leaving, the resident slipped him a note. He wanted to talk. told police that he'd seen some strange things at the house. Burke wasn't the only one who vanished. Another time, Ben Fink had too. And there were others. But their Social Security checks kept coming. He also described a terrible odor around the boarding house. He said he once worked at a mortuary and recognized the smell of death.
Whereabouts?
The police officer filed a missing persons report on Burke Montoya. Detective John Cabrera of the Sacramento Police Department was assigned the case. The name Dorothea Puente was familiar to him. She was known as a champion of the dispossessed.
She was highly respected of all of